Hi everyone. We'll just wait for everybody to join. Let's give everybody maybe 2 to 3 minutes and then we'll begin. Hi, can you hear me okay? Can somebody tell me if they can hear me okay? You can give me a thumbs up or give me a. Okay, let's get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a, a YouTube video on mind maps because that's very pertinent to today's lecture, and then we will get started. Okay.
to be the ways in which we think most effectively. And I studied neurophysiology, I studied psychology, I studied psycholinguistics.
Do you want to maximise your mind's creative potential and generate brilliant ideas? Tony Buzan is a best-selling author and world-renowned expert on creativity, learning and memory. He has helped millions of people across the world unlock their potential with his intuitive thinking tool, the Mind Map. So, what are mind maps?
These are techniques for thinking that over 40 years and thousands of years of experience and research have been found to be the ways in which we think most effectively. And I studied neurophysiology, I studied psychology, I studied psycholinguistics, I studied pre-medicine, I studied the notes of the great thinkers, and I studied myself, what actually worked for me and what didn't. And over the 40 years evolved the Mind Map.
Mind maps are easy to create and effective. We start with an eye-catching central image in the middle of a blank page. We then create branches that radiate out from this image and reflect your ideas.
You start a mind map with an image in the center. Why an image? Picture is worth 1,000 words, stimulates memory, stimulates associations, stimulates your thought. From the central image, the second law is main curvilinear branches. These emanate from the central image. Those main branches are curvilinear because thinking is natural, it's organic, and the curvilinear branch attracts the brain more. Those branches, which are called in psychology, in idiomatic language, the BOIs, the basic ordering ideas, are fundamentally the chapter headings of your thought. From those branches emanate, not hanging off the ends, but emanating from the main branches, the BOIs, the chapter headings, emanate these second level ideas. From those, the third level, from those, the fourth level, and very quickly you realize that the mind map as a manifestation of your thought is an infinite thinking process. You can go on adding branches to this branch forever. You can go on adding branches to this branch forever. So the mind map reflects the fact that potentially your thinking, your intelligences are infinitely capable of generation.
Add only one key word to each branch, avoiding phrases or sentences.
Wherever you can, and this should be basically everywhere, one key idea per branch. Why one and not two? Why not a phrase? The reason is that each key idea, each key word, each key image is like a little exploding supernova. So every one radiates out associations. And when you're building a mind map, you want each one of those supernovas of meaning to have the freedom to generate ideas. If you put them in phrases, it's like putting your hand in a cast. You rigidify all the joints, which is what makes your arm and hand such a phenomenally competent tool. Similarly with the mind map, the single word per line rule actually gives you more explosive freedom, more explosive creativity.
To make your map more effective, you should use colour and stimulating images throughout.
The mind map triggers. It uses colour instead of monochrome. Colours, plural. Do you like colours? Of course you do. And a colour is a thinking tool. It's not some childish thing. Colour allows you to order, to discriminate, to code, to highlight, to generate thought, to remember. It's an ultimate thinking tool if used well, and especially in the context of the mind map. Images throughout. Same as for the central image, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So if you have images throughout your mind map, then you are going to automatically have more powerful memory, more stimulation, more interest, more generative thought.
Mind mapping has been proven to boost your productivity, creativity, memory and comprehension, and can be used for almost anything, from planning
once I think um, we have a good quorum, we'll begin. So let's just hold for maybe a minute or so. Okay. All right. Okay. So here is, you know, the whys, right? So let's look at uh, the topic today in a little more detail. Um, Today, I want to talk to you about an industry skill that is highly valued, which is problem solving. And this does not apply to engineering only. Be you are an engineer, a designer, a manager, an entrepreneur, you are a lawyer, you are an architect, you're a doctor, doesn't matter, right? I think the ability to identify a problem, to break it down into its components, and to solve the problem is what differentiates you, right? And um, since we are talking about everything that the industry expects from you, either as an employee of a corporate, or you being your own employer, if you have your own business, still this is what will set you apart, because this technique, this method that we are going to see today, um, is not something which people have invented recently, or they have found something new recently. But this is a method which allows one to take a best choice, right? The best decision at a certain point in time. We all understand that the every decision that we make has kind of a point in time life, meaning that decision is appropriate for that point in time, and similarly a problem and its solution is appropriate at that point in time. How fast you can get to how the best solution possible basically sets you apart, right? All right. So company don't just pay for knowledge, they pay for an ability to apply knowledge to solve challenges. Think about it. Almost every innovation that you admire, right? I mean, today's innovations, if you look at your smartphone, or the smart applications, the smart apps that are sitting on your phone, electric vehicles, they came from someone solving a problem in a new way, you know. So it's kind of maybe a little out of bounds today to talk about what made those people think about those problem and so on. But we are going to look at a little bit of how to build that habit also today. And that is why you will find that recruiters or industry leaders call it a top soft sought after skill. All right. So if you recall, during our first sessions at Satcam, we talked about there are like maybe several qualities in a professional that we look for, that we hire for. And these professionals, we have seen that they become very successful in their career path. um, we have tried to distill it into these top 7 traits that make people successful in their corporate life. These are industry's most sought after skills, and this is also a pattern that we have seen in MVPs, right? When I say MVP, we are talking about most valuable players in teams, right? So always you will find that in a team of 100 people, there are 20 which stand out, right? What is that common pattern in those 20 people who stand out of a crowd of 100 people? And maybe there are two out of those 20 who are just superstars, right? What is that pattern in those two out of 20, and so on. So they have built exceptional abilities in one or more of these seven traits, right? So I'm not I'm not saying that all these people who are you know who are high performers in industry, who are successful in the industry, they have all these traits. But I have always found, and it's not just my, but our collective Satkam knowledge, we have always found that there is at least one of these traits where these guys are spectacular, right? They are way way above the cut line, right? Way above the bar, the average bar, right? And if I were to force prioritize these seven, I would say the buck stops at problem solving, right? So, if when I mean, all of us now understand, from our last conversation on product management and other discussions, that there is what is called as relative prioritization and force prioritization. And out of these seven, though we are saying that there are like seven top traits, seven top skills, if we were to force ourselves in a corner and say, okay, give me the top of the top skill that you would focus on to be successful, then I would vote for problem solving, right? So again, to me, this is the most sought after skill in the industry. Now, the common question that comes up, and I've had several conversations with several people around this. Some people feel that, hey, you know what, problem solving comes naturally to that guy. I'm not so great at problem solving, but if you tell me what to do, I'll be really good at it. Now, is that something which is the absolute truth? And we try to investigate, we try to dig deeper into figuring out whether this is a skill which somebody is born with, or this is a skill that is learnable, right? So very much one can train their minds and form a habit of approaching a solution. A big mistake that people make is trying to solve a problem all at once. They kind of jumping to solution, right? Many a times you must have heard your heard members, team members, if you're doing certain group activities, say that, hey, don't jump to solution, right? Let us follow a methodology and arrive at a solution, right? um, so imagine, you are told that, hey, go improve the traffic condition in the city, right? It's like traffic snarls everywhere. Go improve that. Now this is an overwhelming problem, right? But you will find that you ask students, or you ask a group of people uh, how to solve traffic problems, and they will start like rattling out solutions, right? Hey, we should do this, we should do that, we should do that, we should do that, right? So there are 20 things, but there is no method, right? There is no method that the people are applying. So imagine being asked to improve the traffic in the city, and now imagine that if you break it down, right? If you break it down, you might see smaller solvable parts. You might think about, okay, let's think of this problem in terms of traffic signals. Are traffic signals efficient? That's one question to answer. What about the road conditions? Maybe that's another question to answer. What if we have more public transportation? Maybe a third question to answer. What about the people discipline, right? I mean, so many times you have seen that the road is good, the signals are working, but people just don't follow uh, the regulations, right? So that's people behavior on the road. So suddenly, once you start breaking it down that way, um, uh, an overwhelming problem, like a big problem, oh, solve traffic congestion in the city, starts seeming manageable, right? So breaking down a problem is half the solution, and you will see that I will probably keep repeating this um, quite often in this conversation, right? How important breaking down a problem is. All right, so the conclusion is that this problem solving is absolutely a learnable skill, and everybody can do it. um, One just has to put effort um, to be able to become a good problem solver, right? Okay, so now let's look at what happens when there is no method to this madness, right? What happens when people jump to solutions quickly? What happens when we are not talking about root cause of the problem, and then several other things that may go wrong, right? So I'll pause here for maybe a minute or so. Would love for everybody on this meeting to tell me what is it that they see going wrong if there is no method to problem solving. What do you think, what happens? Okay, so what we need to do now is, each of you kind of, use the chat window and tell me what happens. Don't use a method for problem solving, right? I want each of you to kind of put your minds to, what may go wrong, what happens if you don't do problem solving the right way, or if you're not methodical in problem solving. Okay, so let's do this. From this conversation and from some past conversations, I have actually collected a few. So let's look at what that is. Okay. When there is no method to problem solving. Okay, so like many of you answered the typical mistakes that happen when problem solving is happens without method is this, right? It's all a chaotic room, a chaotic situation, people talking over each other, people pointing fingers at each other. There is quick blame game. There is improper or poor communication. There is no plan, plan of action. There is nobody taking notes. Um, Nobody uh, trying to figure that, okay, how far down the path are we in problem solving. So many things that don't work well, right, when you're talking about um, not following a method. Like, it's like trying to fix a leaking pipe by repainting the wall, right? And the once you repaint, the paint kind of chips off because the water pipe behind the wall is continually leaking, and then you apply more paint on it, right? So looks like a temporary fix, but the real problem never goes away, right? Only if we had followed the method of breaking down that problem and trying to find out why that paint is chipping away, and then getting to the root cause, which is first fix the leaking pipe and then go paint the wall, I think it would have been a better solution, right? So another issue that you see is there is who is owning this. So many times we see, we should do this, we should do that, we should do that, but we never actually pay a lot of attention that, okay, we who is we, right? Who is that one person who is taking responsibility of one area of the problem and going to take it to conclusion, right? So ownership becomes very important when it comes as a part of the solution, right? So in this kind of situation, there is no owner, right? And the last one, the biggest thing is that the problem definition itself is lost, right? In a chaotic situation. So I'll show you a funny but very insightful quote, right? If I had an hour to chop all wood, I will spend the first 45 minutes sharpening my axe. Does anybody want to kind of tell me, who wrote this? You can write in your chat window, or you can tell me, whose sentence is it? Right? This is a sentence, a famous quote, and it is actually attributed to Abraham Lincoln. Um, but this is not about chopping wood. This is all about preparation, right? Preparation to do what? Preparation to solve problems. And if we were to dive a little deeper here, the wooden block is basically the problem that you are tackling. The axe is the tool, right? Or the method, or the thoughts that you are putting behind. And sharpening of the axe is the planning, preparation, approach, before jumping into any kind of action, right? So far so good. So I think this talks a lot. If you jump straight into cutting without preparation, you will waste a lot of effort and time. And remember, you have been given 1 hour with a blunt kind of axe, and without a proper plan on how am I going to chop this wood into smaller pieces, you will probably not end up doing the job well, or not end up doing it on time, right? So both are important in industry. You have to deliver on time with quality, right? So much so for the definition of problem solving, right? I think by now, you're quite familiar with what I mean by um, problem solving, right? And what are the benefits of it? What happens if you don't do it properly? Now let's review some problem statements, right? This slide is purposefully kept here, so that students can come back here and use these techniques, use the technique that they are learning in this class, and apply it to all these problems, right? This is just a list of problems that came to our mind when we created this content. But there are hundreds of other problems, right? That one could look at and apply this technique and arrive at a solution, right? So what we will do is we will tackle one problem today, okay, which is the last one in this list. By the way, you can look at this and you will find out that this is not an exercise for computer science students, right? This is an exercise for anyone, okay? So let's take maybe the first one, that in your college, the best brands, meaning the companies which are very popular brands, should come to your college for recruitment, right? Very simple expectation, but a problem as well, and you got to solve that problem. What will you do so that big companies get attracted to your college for recruitment? That's basically the problem that we are handling here. If I look at something else, right? Let's say if there is a company where people are not very motivated, you see lethargy, you see you know demotivation, you see people have a lot of inertia, they don't have a lot of willingness to deliver, and that is always a problem to solve, right? In large companies you will find that people is everything, right? Or at least I would say people, motivated people working in an industry is 50% of the job done. Then the rest of the 50% is the tools, technology, and everything else, right, to that makes the high quality delivery on time happen. So this is a big problem, right? Always, and will be a big problem until this particular company has motivated employees. So how are you going to fix this? You can take several examples, right from the road congestion to polluted rivers to improving an experience, a user experience for an app, and so on. So what we are going to do today is talk about one problem, okay, and um, let me first describe what it is. So we all are working for a mobile a company which has a mobile app, right? And our app does something, right? Some transactions, or some information that our users can use from the app. Our app is available in maybe 20 different countries, right? Now what has happened is our app has started crashing, and the company has to fix this problem, and you, as the leader of the team who is going to look at this problem, has to come up with something, right? Has to fix this, right? I mean, like we were discussing in our earlier meetings, there is not a whole lot of hand holding that you will see once you step into the industry. People will generally give you a direction, but you will have to kind of figure your way to the solution, right? So if somebody comes and tells you, hey, go fix this problem, our mobile app is crashing, what should I do next, right? What should I do next? Any guesses before I move forward? What would you do next if this were you and the problem was assigned to you? let's take maybe a minute for you um, to tell me what would you do next. Okay, so we'll move forward. First, we have to figure if there is any technique for this. Technique for what? You know, so that we are able to solve this problem methodically, have a good coverage, make sure that you're not missing some obvious things, help on focusing on key things. Are we doing in the right sequence and so on and so forth? Yes, there is a method, and there are several techniques, right? So we'll talk about um, maybe one method, right, that is generally successful, and the techniques could be many. So from a technique perspective, mind mapping is a hugely popular technique. It kind of helps you capture kind of the literally helps you map your mind, right, to the problem. So you can have all the data relating to that problem, including the possible options and solutions, all of it, you know, mapped into a file which is called a mind map, and it helps you clearly think about what to do next, gives you a lot of guidelines and points, make sure that you have not missed out anything and so on, right? So a great technique, very popular in the industry. Fishbone, another root cause analysis kind of technique, that if the the outward manifestation of the problem is the mobile app crashing, then let me talk about everything that can go wrong for the crash to happen, right? And you almost build a fishbone diagram. If you don't know or not familiar with fishbone, go look it up on the internet. You will find lots of images. It really looks like a the skeleton of a fish, and kind of all arrows pointing towards um, causes, sub causes, which finally can lead to the main cause, right? And then the problem. There is five whys technique. Five whys is asking the why question five times. Oh my, the number of users on my website are going down. Why? Right? You'll find that my um, website is slow, right? Or you might find that there is too much friction that I have on my website, and so on and so forth. So there could be multiple reasons why, and you keep asking the question why till you find out a reasonably good answer. So it, I mean, strictly speaking, doesn't have to be five. It can be four if you arrive at that, or six. But what it means is that you keep asking these questions until you get to a bulk cause, but fixing which will fix a lot of that problem, right? So that's what the five whys technique is. Then there is thinking hats and a SWOT analysis and so on. So the method that we are looking at here is identify and define the problem, use a mental model. Remember, we learned about mental models in in our critical thinking session. These mental models are nothing but rule sets or paradigms which one uses um, to apply to certain data, to certain problems, and gives them good enough a guidance on what to do next. So apply as many mental models as possible, and the right ones. Um, for the root cause analysis, pull the right data. So basically collecting the right data, and then disregarding what is not good. A couple of days back, I was actually in a session with some kids, and one of the kids asked a great question. He asked me, um, where do you stop, right? I mean, you can keep collecting data, so where do you stop really, right? So I would say that the focus should be on the relevant data. If you are solving traffic problem in Mumbai, do you really need to know the pollution caused by cars in Vietnam? You probably don't, right? So while this is very obvious, still a lot of times we find in the industry that people take into consideration data which may not be relevant to the problem. So collecting enough data and then getting rid of data which is not useful is what I mean by needs right data. And then you enumerate, whatever solutions are in front of you. There is always more than one solution to a problem. So you put all of that on the table and then figure out, what works the best in the given situation, right? Um, Next is prioritization, and last one is you pick one and then you create an implementation plan out of it, right? So once you have a solution in mind, you can then create an implementation plan after that. The planning itself or the implementation or the execution plan itself is not a part of this method, but there is a separate topic, a separate session that we have on how to manage large projects, how to plan, right, for large projects and so on. So you should attend that to figure out how to create implementation plans or execution plans, right? All right. So let's put this into practice. Again, I'm going to repeat the same question. Each one of you is requested to use a pen and paper and write 3 or 4 questions that come to your mind when you think of the problem, right? So we'll give everybody 3 to 4 minutes. I'll pause the presentation for a minute. You can have this, mobile app crash. Think about all the questions that come to your mind. What should you do? What should you do next? Um, if you have an answer, put it in the chat window. Um, we will also give you, you know, uh, some hints after some time, but the main hint is ask a lot of questions, right? That's the main hint. So let's take 3 minutes. Each of you is requested to put your questions that come to your mind in the chat window, and uh, So keep sending in your questions in the chat window. It is basically, important to think about everything that can lead up to the crash, and then everything that will influence the solution, right? So what could be those things which lead to the crash? And let's say, I give you one hint, which is, what if, you suddenly get to know that there's only three people who can really fix this problem. You need an expert iOS developer, you need an expert Android developer, and you need an expert tester, and you need these three people to fix the problem. Will it change your solution? Another hint is, what happens if you fix this? How many customers are going to make, are you going to are going to be happy after the fix? So the question is, how many customers are affected because of this crash, right? So like Anjali is saying, is there a problem from company side or client side or the user side? Correct. So has the user basically, kind of problems from the user side? Anjali, could be the user inserted bad characters, right, or invalid characters, but it is the app's responsibility to make sure and check that these characters that are inserted are validated, right? Your next is, when did it start? Yes, absolutely. So was it something like a boundary condition, that there was a time zone change or there was a date change, like Y2K, or something that a new release from Android that happened, right? Or new release from iOS that happened, and so on. Is the app able to handle large amount of data? So did the crash happen because there was a large amount of data or a large amount of user traffic? Very good questions. Is this a technical issue or is a design issue? Yes. Kamal is saying, how did it happen? At what stage it happened? At the start of the application or some particular interface? Perfect. So Kamal is basically saying, what was the user doing actually? Which means that if it is at some interim point in the application, it means that the app opened up properly, the user was able to use the app for some time, and then at a certain point it crashed. So it could lead to two things, right? One is that, the memory management of the app is not good. There was some memory leakage. So after usage of the app for about 10 minutes, the memory leakage caused the crash. Or it could just be that, there are only certain transactions because of which the app crashes. How much load that the app can take. Yeah, let's say the app is asking you to upload a file, and that file is 1 GB, and the app cannot process that kind of a large file, and it crashes. Could happen, right? So good answers. Let's proceed with the session and see, what all answers we collected from every other session and what we came up with. Okay, we'll talk about it as soon as we are ready. Okay, so now that there is some of the questions received, I'll just aggregate it, right? Aggregate it into all those questions that I have received from several other students and other sessions also. The main thing, the main hint here is the inquisitiveness part, right? Remember, we learnt about inquisitiveness in some of the past lectures, past sessions, and you should apply the mind to everything that you need to understand in order to get to the root of the problem, right? That's how you should do it. Now, the kind of questions or the questions that came up are, how does this crash happen, right? What are the steps? Like step 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, and boom, the crash happens, right, on the mobile app. What devices does this crash occur, right? It could be, does it only occur on Apple devices? Does it occur only on Nokia phones, or only on on Google or me, or what is it, right? How many users are affected? So is it like, are you telling me that out of the 200,000 users that we have on our app, only 20 users are affected, all 2,000 are affected, 200,000 are affected, or is it a number in between? What gives, right? Meaning, what happens if we don't fix this, right? What happens if we fix the crash? What happens if we don't fix the crash? All of it, right? So currently, what is the problem that we are running into if, because of the crash, right? That's the question that we need to ask. um, is there a boundary condition? Like, does it happen, when you're using the app exactly, at midnight? So there could be some correlation to maybe the date change, right? The date changes at midnight, and maybe, our code is not handling the date change properly, and then it crashes or something like that, right? That's one kind of a boundary condition that we are talking about. Does it happen when it is on a low memory phone? Does it happen when the storage is full? So I'm using my app and my storage on the phone becomes full. That is the time it crashes, right? So two things. What are those things that happen simultaneously for it to crash? Um, does it happen when I cross a limit of 100,000 concurrent users? So I have 200,000, 2 lakh users on my mobile app. But when 1 lakh out of those 2 lakh, or any number beyond 1 lakh, start accessing my app at the same time, my app crashes. Is that the condition? Do we have a fix? Do we even know of a solution right now? That is also one question to ask, right? Was the user input valid? Was the user let's say, you're signing up on the mobile app, right? There is this sign up screen or register screen, and you're asked to put in your username and password, and you put in some wrong characters there. We have not warned the user that, those characters you should not be putting, but the user, let's say in their name they use dollar sign, and our app is not coded to handle that dollar sign in the name. Let's say only alphanumeric characters is what our code can handle. Maybe that is the a bad uh, user input, or at least maybe it's a correct user input, but our app is not handling it well, right? We talked about memory issue. What is the type of the crash? Like, does my phone hang for some time and then it recovers and comes back again? Does my entire phone become unusable because of my app? Or is it that only my app crashes, but otherwise the user is able to use the phone? What happens, right? So though that is, various different types of crashes. um, do we have a crash report? Typically software keeps a log, audit logs, and software is able to beam all these audit logs to their OEMs, right? Uh, to their companies, to their parent companies, so that they can keep improving these kind of crashes in the next updates that they get, and not so many people get those crashes, right? Um, as the number increases. So these are the questions that come to mind. Now, let's walk through the steps of problem breakdown and resolution, apply inquisition and critical thinking as required, right? So that's our hint on how we are going to solve this problem. So the first one is describe what is actually happening, right? The first thing, remember, the chaos kind of diminishes once you start describing what problem are we trying to solve. So many times you will in the industry also, I've seen through my experience that you there is a lot of panic, lot of chaos, and you call people into a room and ask people to explain what's wrong, what's the problem. You will at least get three problem statements right there. So articulation of the right problem is the first step, right? The first step is describe what's actually happening without any assumptions, right? Don't say that, oh, this mobile phone is crashing and I know it must be crashing in, blah, blah, blah. No. Mobile app crashing and we are asked to fix this problem. That is the problem in front of us we are trying to solve, right? How is it happening? So we see that the support tickets are going up. As we started looking at the support tickets, the volume of support tickets went up, and some people gave us bad reviews on our app store, and they mentioned that app closes immediately on Android. Okay. Oh, are you saying on Android? Yes, on Android. Okay, so at least we have one data point to check later. Does this happen on iOS also, right? Um, what do you mean by crash, right? Basically, some unhandled exception that terminates the application process, right? Okay, so we are all in agreement that that's is what we mean by crash, right? Because some people may call a hang a crash, uh, uh, a temporary lack of response from the application as a crash, or a complete meltdown also a crash, right? So it could be anything, but let's define. Okay, what is happening? The complete app process is terminating. Okay, now we understand what exactly the users are facing, right? And where do we see this happening? So um, if we look at the support tickets and if we look at some of the users that we have talked to, it happens in our sign up or first launch. So while our app is getting launched the first time, or while people are signing up, so it is safe to say that people are using our app for the first time when they are signing up. That's one set of people. The other set of people is the ones who um, have launched that app for the first time, right? Meaning they have signed up maybe some time back, but first time in 24 hours, every 24 hours, the first time you launch the app, and then you can keep it running, it doesn't crash. But the first time you launch and you do some certain clicks, it crashes, right? So this is the first principles breakdown, right? So what are the inputs, right? The inputs are the devices, the operating system version, what language, what local, our app is available in 20 countries. So in 20 countries, there are at least five languages spoken. Our largest base is English. Is it happening on English? Our next largest base is, let's say, French and German, and then a wide byte character like Japanese, or Bahasa or whatever, right? Or Hindi. So what are the languages, and then what is the feedback from the customer? We heard already that while they were signing up or while they were onboarding, it crashes. What was the network state at that point in time? Is it that there was a blip in the network? Was the app connected to its backend? um, was the network solid, and so on, right? By the way, the app should not crash in these conditions. We can't blame the network for the app crash, but we need to know whether our app crashes because of that, right? So that's the deal. Then what is the system? Right? So the system tells us that you open the UI, there is validation, there is the while the user is typing in their username password, the form field gets validated on the app itself even before going and hitting the server. There is some level of formatting parsing that happens, and then an API call goes to our backend, and the response to that API comes in, and we store it, right? So that's kind of, the sequence of events happen inside of our app, right? Which are not prominent to the user, but we as people who have manufactured the app, we know that this is what happens when the user clicks a certain button and so on, right? And what is the output? The state is either safe or the state is in a crash state, right? So this is again, kind of remember first principles thinking, without getting biased or without getting judgmental. We are trying to see it from a first principles basis, right? And again, this the first principles thinking mental model has been kind of at the forefront of many innovations where people have questioned why things happen the way things happen, and try to apply these first principles, and they have always arrived at an innovative solution or an innovative alternative, right? So that's the first step. Second is, let's collect all the data that is needed, right? So let's decide, how urgent this is before we jump to the fixes. Um, we need some heuristic, like some formula to calculate the priority, right? So that we can say that, this is the priority assigned to this, right? So how much is the impact, what is the severity, is there revenue at risk, how many are percentage of crash free users, crash free sessions. I want to know, the percentage of Android monthly active users, the absolute count and the percentages. So this is all the data that I'm collecting around the crash, right? Remember somebody said, we this is happening only on Android. That's why we are collecting only the Android data, right? Um, is it happening? I want to know the app version. So is it the current version that is out in the market, or is it the last two versions? What is the OS version? Has the user, is it happening on operating systems or Android systems where the user has not updated uh, the OS to its current version, and so on and so forth, right? So for example, we arrive at something like, okay, 2 million Android MAUs, monthly active users, and the affected users are 100. So 1 lakh affected users, which is 5% of Android MAUs. Okay, so at least we got one number, right? So we have started now collecting the right kind of data, relevant data. Okay. um, and then, just use a rule of thumb, right? So high severity, so something which is a hard crash, um, is, you know like, there is no option but to go fix it, right? It's a hard crash in a critical path. For example, if I open a banking app and the bank does not allow me to log in itself, that's a blocker on a critical path, right? I don't care whether, I go inside, I do some transactions, and, I have to, when I click the button to talk to a customer service representative, my bank application crashes. Now remember that crash and this crash, right? Or remember the comparison between what I told you first, which is the bank application not allowing me to log in versus the bank application crashing, allowing me to do everything else but crashing when I click the customer support button. Okay, which one would you want to fix first? Obviously the one where you want to log in, right? So not every crash needs to be fixed, but crashes on the critical path, absolutely, right? And then everything that is medium reach, and then everything that is like a P2, in the industry there is severity priority called priority 1, priority 2, priority 3. So it is called a P2, P3. So something which we can look at in the future, right? So all this data we have collected, we have not still not arrived at any decision, right? Now what we do is apply another mental model which is called, the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, right? On where exactly the crash is happening. Okay, so we have found that, okay, you know what, there is a certain place in which when the user sends us bad data, I mean, let's not blame the user sends us data which our app is not able to handle, right? What are the paths inside our code that this data gets parsed through? Okay, so we find, let's say, two paths, right? So there is signature A and signature B. Okay, so these are called as crash signatures, or once you have a crash dump, these are paths that could be traced, that, okay, this is where the crash is happening if this particular code gets executed, right? And for a minute, let's hold on to the mobile app crash problem. Let's move to what is Pareto principle itself, right? So all of you know the 80-20 rule, or if you don't, again, please look it up. What it means is 20, 20% of your customers are bringing 80% of your revenue, right? Or another way to think is 20% of your investment is bringing 80% of your profits. The 20% that you the 20% time that you spend on, or rather the time that you spend on 20% important things is bringing you 80% success. So what it means is you focus on the critical 20% to get a massive 80% result. And that critical 20% could be anything on that left side, which is blue, and the massive 80% is anything that is the output, which is on the right. Okay, so that's the way to think about this 80-20 rule. And let's say, we applied this 80-20 rule to our crash to find out that, oh, you know what, there are two paths that our code takes, path 1 and path 2. Path 2 is taken by 80% of our users. If we fix the path 2 only, then 80% of users will be okay. We'll be left with only 20%, and we'll fix that later, right? And these are not decisions taken in isolation. This is another data point that you get out of this mental model. But it kind of gives you a level of clarity, right? For example, if you find that there are 10 root causes to a crash, right? 10 things that can cause a crash. The question to ask is, tell me the top 2 things which definitely make it crash, right? If you fix those top 2 things, 8 of the 10 crashes are gone. Then it's okay. Do you want to fix all the problems from number 3 to number 10? Probably not, right? Those are, and when I say probably not, it is again, using 80-20 rule, but then, more thought needs to be applied, before a call is taken. All right. So now, we have gone through these steps, and what is our hypothesis? Okay, our hypothesis now is saying that, okay, I have now enough understanding. Okay, so I have enough understanding. Mostly it is happening on Androids. It spikes up, the app crash spikes up on first launch or sign up. many of the people who are complaining about this are from the non-English markets, and the dominant signature that I find internally, right, in the crash, while I trace the crash path, is the formatting and parsing of the user supplied data. Okay, so now this is unifying all this, right? Can I now safely say that my hypothesis is locale dependent? It depends on the language, right? It is parse formatting bug during onboarding, right? So that's a simple statement where I have arrived at a hypothesis of why the crash is happening, right? All right, so we have gone through the top three steps already. Identify, define the problem. We have done the root cause analysis. We have enumerated the solutions, and we have the hypothesis, right? Now let's look at some more, right? Um, Now our earlier 5% impact number had a cause, which was local parsing. It happens on Android versions. Let's say, snow cone and tiramisu, when the user enters, some non-alphanumeric or wide byte characters. Um, the crash reliably reproduces when the device is not English, and the number date is parsed in the profile step, right? The stack trace, for example, the way certain numbers are written in certain languages. You see on the row number 3 there that the number 1 lakh is written as 100 comma 000. In other languages or some other uh, uh, languages, it is written as 100.000, but the dot is not really the decimal, it's not 100, but it is still 100,000, right? So it could be that small change between a dot and a comma which would have caused these crashes, right? We don't know, or the ability to parse that. um, we know that 5% of Android users. So now the main question is to decide, should we wait for the next quarter? Should we wait another 3 months? Because our teams are already busy with whatever they have been assigned today. Should we wait for 3 months, or should we do it now, right? um, what is the impact if we do it now? What is the impact on revenue? If we do it later, what is the impact of revenue? Similarly, if we do it now, what is the impact of our app ratings on the App Store? If we do it later, what is the impact of app rating on App Store, right? So, um, shall I spend time, estimating the fix? Meaning, what is estimating the fix, right? What it means is that I have to actually get down to the code level and figure out what it takes to fix this problem at the code level, and then test it out also, right? Remember, I have 200,000 or 2 million users. So need to make sure that once our coding is done, it is well tested also. So that takes time, and then you have to release it to the App Store. The users have to download it, and there has to be communication around it. So there is a whole lot of things to be done for a simple bug fix, right? Even if it is like a 2-day bug fix, there is a whole lot of things which are going to follow, right? Maybe it is not a 2-day bug fix. Maybe it's some external data that the phone is using, and we it can be a 2-day fix. So I just change some parameters somewhere, some configuration somewhere, and I push it out on the server side. Whenever my clients hit that server, they get new configurations and they are good. No more app crashes. If it's that kind of a fix, and if somebody, one of my team members tells me that, or if we conclude that this takes less than 2 days, maybe we take the decision that let's fix it right away. If not, move it to next quarter, right? So the decision is that the impact of the crash, given that it happens only 5% of users and only in a certain path, only in a certain language, the revenue is not that high. We find out that, let's say, it happens with um, some free users, right? So there is no revenue. So it will change our mode of thinking, right? It will change our decision. If I know that by fixing this problem, it's not going to add to my revenue, I would rather use this time to create those two new features and release them to market, and that will bring me more revenue. I will do that. Or that will give me more users or better rating. I will do that. So it is to be weighed against what other thing, what is the opportunity cost of doing it, right? So net net, what are the takeaways of the method? We looked at from a fundamental principles perspective. You broke it down. We looked at the inputs, the transformations and the outputs of our problem, and we looked at one variable at a time. We used a technique called mind mapping, right? um, to so that we are not rabbit holed in one area, or um, you know we are thinking about the the causes and the solutions in a more holistic manner. We applied Pareto principles, sometimes Occam's razor. Remember the one, the Occam's razor is again the simplified thinking part, and then we applied first principles thinking, right? So structured thinking can turn our scary, our app is crashing kind of a problem into a solvable problem, right? So going back to the traffic congestion problem in the city, when those kind of problems get thrown at you, or even this mobile app crash problem, the moment you start breaking down the problem and understanding its inputs, its transformations, its outputs, its causes, what gives, what if we fix now, what if we don't fix now, what happens, once you have that information, the same problem doesn't sound that overwhelming, right? So here is basically. All right, so we are going to look at what is called as mind maps for some time, and then we'll come back to our session. Okay, so this is a tool that I'm using. It's called Xmind, and as you can see, this tool is my mind mapping tool. I use this tool to basically throw in all my ideas, right, on uh, on a piece of paper. And why do I do that? The reason is that for all the good reasons, right, all the good reasons of getting to a level of clarity, right? I want clarity on, okay, there are so many things that we talked about. There are like four different sub nodes. So these, as this is a mind map tool, this is a main node, this is a sub node, this is a sub node, and then these are leaves, right, of those branches. So there are so many things to look at when it comes to causes. Similarly, there are so many things to look at when it comes to diagnosis, right? Another way is, there are so many types of crashes, and then there are mitigation strategies, right? So if you look at just the mitigation strategies, you will find out that there are 5 things that you can do as a part of mitigation, right? So you can either go do some code fixes and do better code handling, error handling in the code. You can better test the software. You can fix the bug and send updates, either bug fixes or crash fixes or patches. You can do better memory management in the software. There are types of memory managements that you can do, and select one of the two. And then there is a overall performance optimization, because one of our suspicions is that number of users also are causing this, and so on, right? So, you know think about a situation where you have only those three people to really help you, and those three people are also working on a new feature, and you are told that you have to fix this problem also, right? There is a way to do it, which is start prioritization. That out of the whatever the 13 things that I have here, right, in this mitigation strategies, which are the top three ones which where I can spend time now, and which are the other 10 where I can push them to later. I don't need to fix them right away. Okay, so I need to find out, and one good way to do it is do some kind of a, so you typically, the way it happens is you sit with experts and put priorities. So for try catch block and changing of that code, obviously every change in code needs that amount of testing and app validation, and then getting your app signed by the app store, and then releasing the update, and so on, right? So it's a process. So no change is trivial, though it has to be continuous in nature. So let's say exception handling we give second priority. Top priority is the input validation. Our user is giving all these dollar and star and whatnot wild characters as their username. We want to do input validation and restrict the input validation to alphanumeric values only, right? And so on and so forth. So I can assign various different kind of priorities to each and every of my nodes here, right? My end nodes here. And you will find that something like what I'm showing you on the screen emerges. Okay, so what is this? What is this? This is nothing but a prioritized list. So now that you know what is how the overall list comes up, you sat with your team, you prioritized everything, and this is now your final priority list. Okay, so all that you see is there are three things on my plate which are number one. So these three people that I have, I will say that, okay, you know what, spend the next 2 weeks fixing this bug, only do crash fixes, only do device compatibility, and only do input validation, do nothing else, and move on to the new feature development. Then that becomes a structured or a methodical way of arriving at what do I do next, right? So essentially, why we are stating all this is simply because you will find that a lot of times, right, a lot of times in the industry there is a large amount of time that gets spent on these kind of conversations, these kind of discussions, but taking these discussions to completion becomes imperative, becomes essential, because you are finally, if there are three people working on something, it is 3 into the number of hours that they are spending, right? So, and time is money, and nobody has unlimited resources. So with the limited resources that you have, what can you do, right? Okay, so let's proceed with our and there has to be communication around it. So there is so that we are not rabbit hole, and within those areas we have given them a priority. So wherever you see number one, out of the same methodology, right, doing some level of ranking and rating, we came up that in error handling we have to do input validation, in testing we have to do device compatibility testing, and in app updates let's send a fix for our crash right now. So those are the only three things out of the 15 things that we need to do right away. Other 12 things we can push to the next quarter or later, right? So applying the Pareto principle here as well, but with the data, right? The backup data of what happens if we don't do it, right? So it has to be a judgment call that we have taken on what we are going to do next. Now, once we know what we are going to do, right, there needs to be a plan, right, to do that. And we'll talk about the plan in a second. The best way to plan such projects is to put them in three buckets: now, next, and later, right? Or here I've even used a fourth bucket called future. Okay, but let's, for simplicity's sake, let's say the later and the future are the same buckets, right? They are anyway beyond 3 months or maybe next year or whatever. So we'll think about it later. But the first two, what are we going to do in the first 2 weeks? We know from this mind map or this prioritization what are the top number ones to be done in the next coming 2 weeks. For that, I'm going to assign two people. 60% of the crashes are going to get mitigated because of that. For the device compatibility, I need two people for 2 weeks, and for the crash fixes the same thing, and so on. Right? So this is the cost that I'm going to incur to fix this. Remember, 2 people for 2 weeks is 4-person weeks time. In 4-person weeks, I have an opportunity to create a new feature versus I have an opportunity to fix this crash, and we have taken a conscious decision that we'll stop putting these resources on the new feature. We would rather put them on the crash, right? So these are the everyday decisions that one has to make in the industry. Quick recap. We identified root cause, we did the RCA, we enumerated all the solutions, we evaluated and prioritized, and then we created a implementation plan, right? So that kind of talks about the entire problem breakdown and solving process. Now we talked about the technique called mind mapping, and I'll spend some time talking about mind mapping itself, right? So first, let's look at why at all we should use mind maps, right? I mean, the simple theory here is that all of us know that we have a left brain and a right brain, and our left brain thinks linearly, our right brain thinks non-linear, right? So all the creativity, innovation, all of that is on the right, or let's say the right brain functions. Okay. Whereas organizing things, organization, putting a structure to things and all that is left brain, right? And many people are visual learners. Okay. They can contribute better if they are presented with visual information. And what information are we talking about? We are talking about data and thoughts, right? So how do you capture this data in a visual format where people can think, look at it at the same time and think clearly, right? In a mind map, information is structured in a way that it actually mirrors exactly how it happens in your brain, right? It's more radiant than linear. Radiant is something which starts in the center and kind of flows outwards, right? It's like the sun rays flowing in all directions, right, at the same time. That's what I mean by radiant. And it literally is a map of your thoughts. It uses a lot of associations and connections that happen in your brain. It represents some triggers that stimulate further thought. So when I say inspires creativity, if you have put all this in a mind map, and even if you explain a mind map to some person, that person will come back with 2 more ideas. Okay, if you are in an ideation mind map. The reason is that your mind map and your presentation of your mind map triggers further ideas in my mind, right? And that is the power of using mind map. Okay, so it inspires creativity. It obviously boosts productivity because you are now going to kick out anything that is not important, not urgent. You're going to punt it to the future, and you're only going to do things which are important and which are urgent to do, and that directly affects productivity. It is a great memory recall tool, and by memory recall it means that so many times it happens to us that, hey, you know what, I forgot what was that one thing that that guy was telling me. Oh, I forgot what he said, but he had said two more good things. Now I don't know. So that's memory recall, and putting things in a mind map actually puts your brain in that habit of memorizing things a little differently and improves your overall memory recall. Not just the recall of things which are on the mind map, but recall in general. It improves reading comprehension, and of course, it is a method to structure information in a very effective manner. Like, there is a central theme, and then there are nodes, and then there are sub nodes, and then there are further nodes, and then there could be lines between these sub nodes, which are relationships and which are connections. So all of that can be represented using a mind map. Again, let me just remind you that mind map is one of techniques. It is not the only technique that we are suggesting, but it is a very popular technique that is used in the industry. So it makes basically it to easier to extract your ideas from your head into something visible and structured. So somebody asked me, where do I use mind mapping? Personally, they were asking me, where have you really used mind mapping the most, right? And my top 3 that I have used is whenever we are doing a product concept, right, or a problem solving or planning. In each of these cases I have used mind map. The maps and their content differs, but the method is the same, right? So now that we know why we should use mind maps, let's look at how we should use them, right? And we'll follow up with a live exercise if we can. But anyway, the best way that I recommend is make a long list, put it on a map. There are levels to this map, right? Levels are like concentric circles, like a sunburst diagram, where the more outside you go, the more detailed you become. The more inside you go, the more abstract you become, right? And we will actually look at the mind map, a mind map which I have prepared for our mobile app Crash, right? Ensure that the nodes at each level are the same level of detail, right? So they're same level of detail. In filmmaking, say the writer is building a character for the protagonist, right, the hero. So the hero is nothing but the central idea. Now if I was a writer, right, for the film industry, and was writing the story of a movie, and we are thinking of hero, the hero of the movie or the protagonist of the movie, a mind map comes to help, because now you can start talking about various nodes in the hero's ecosystem, right? So the hero's education and everything about his education, everything about where that person got educated, and that education has to tie up with the kind of language that the person uses in the movie, and so on. Second could be lifestyle. What lifestyle is that person living, right? Yeah, are they living in a rural area, a semi-urban area, urban area, or an affluent area? What is it? Similarly, on the romantic life, on what are the aspirations or the desires, what family, what are the personality types. So all these become nodes of the main theme called hero. Because remember, my story has to come together. It can't have dissonance. It can't be incomprehensive later that, oh, but in the last, in before the interval, they showed something else, and wait a minute, it doesn't correlate right now, right? So this is basically the way even storytellers use mind maps to kind of make sure that their stories, their imagination also has coherence, right? So this is how you build the mind map. And then what is it used for? I already answered that question kind of. I have used it um, a lot of times for a product concept brainstorming. If you have to do new product launches, again, a lot of personal experiences, as well as witnessing other people use mind maps when we are talking about new product launches, all the 20,000 things that happen around a new product launch. What can go right, what can go wrong, what if it goes wrong, what do we do? All those things can be mapped, right? And so on and so forth. So essentially, can be used for multiple things. This is how our app crash mind map looks like. The central theme is app crash. The top four nodes, for simplicity's sake, I have kept it only four. So what are the causes? What is the diagnosis and troubleshooting? What are the types of crashes? And what are the strategies, right? And this is how the entire mind map looks like. Okay. So we looked at the bottom right corner, which is the mitigation strategies, but the entire mind map. And by the way, don't think of this as a very long exercise. Okay. Even for this kind of mobile app crash, you get like one or two people in a room, and you will be able to build this out in maybe an hour's time. That, okay, here is how the mind map looks like. And then, once you have the mind map, once you have the problem defined very well, you are structuring all the collection of the data around that problem after that, right? So don't think of this as an overwhelming activity in itself. It is basically just putting down your thoughts on record, on paper, for all the good things that mind map is built for, right? So that brings us to kind of the end of the two main parts of our conversation today. The third is, like, if you go back to this slide, you will know that, I talked about problem solving being a learnable skill. Yes, absolutely, it is a learnable skill. But how, right? Can you tell me a recipe of how do I make it my habit? Okay. So the slides here on are just tips, but I hope you find these interesting. The first tip is be curious. Okay. And remember, we are on the topic of building the habit of problem solving. To be able to solve problems well, let's start with curiosity. Let's start with asking the right questions. Okay. How do these questions even come to your mind? Can you build a habit around that? So you see a cycle, you see a ceiling fan, you see a ballpoint pen. What questions come to your mind, right? Can you look at these objects? So the tip is that, look at these objects, and you don't have to do it in this session, but take an object and ask yourself, what problem does this product solve? Okay. So if you start looking at your ballpoint pen, why is it designed this way? How old is this design? If I'm told to redo this design, what is the one thing which I will change? What is the manufacturing process for this product? What will be the manufacturing cost for this product? So there are so many questions that you can ask, right? For a simple object like a ballpoint pen or a bicycle or a ceiling fan. Now do that, right? Do that purposefully on asking these questions, and then noting down these answers also, right? Noting down the answers to these questions, that, oh, now I know a little better. Now the habit that you are putting your brain into is not ignoring small details, not ignoring things which you otherwise think are very obvious, right? The second tip is asking to get involved, right? So, and here is where you have to show a little bit of courage. A lot of times, I find that people are shy of doing this, right? Shy of doing what? Let's say you find a problem to fix. Okay. It doesn't matter if you are capable of doing it or you have the expertise or not, doesn't matter. But find a problem. Okay. um, Once you find a problem, take that problem statement and use our method, build a mind map, and putting it in the mind map itself is a lot of involvement in that problem, right? So ask to get involved. Talk to people around you who are in the industry. Ask them to give you a problem. Talk to your teachers and tell them that outside my curriculum, can I solve any other problem? If there is, let's say, your college elevator is failing, okay, or if the college elevator is very crowded and somebody needs to think of finding a solution, what could the solution be so that people are not stranded on every floor, right? And the elevator is not that crowded. What could be the solution? Talk to your teachers, talk to your family, talk to your friends, and find out problems, right? And then articulate. Can you articulate that problem to them? Okay, describe the one problem that you have analyzed and found a solution. So take that problem through the steps that we talked about today. Be it, let's say, that elevator crowding problem. So elevator in my college always is crowded and I don't, I have to wait like maybe 3 minutes before I get in. How do I solve that problem? Go solve it on your own. Ask your friends or teachers that, hey, I looked at this problem in a different manner. Here is a mind map around it. Here are possible 5 solutions. What do you think? Right? So solicit their responses. Don't be shy of it, because this will put you in the habit of articulation. First time you might take like 10 minutes to talk about it. The next time you will be able to convey the same thing in 2 minutes and the same essence with the same conviction, right? And that is where your power of articulation will start growing. So those are, I would say, the top 3 tips for problem solving today. Again, this is kind of the end of our session on problem solving, problem breakdown, and arriving at a solution using techniques like mind mapping. Hope you kind of put that into practice. There is lots of reference material online as well. There are YouTube videos on mind mapping. There is a whole lot of repository on various techniques that are used in problem solving. Go read them. What I showed you today is not the only technique. There are several, but certainly that's one of the popular techniques that's used in the industry. And follow the tips at the end. Talk, pull some problems and walk those problems through the what you learned today, and articulate these to your friends. All right. Thanks for your time today. We'll talk again in the future.